The Museum Roadshow is brought to you by 125 Apparel.
Hello and welcome to the Becker County Museum Roadshow. Today we are at the museum visiting with Blanche Peterson Hines, and we're going to find out, she grew up in Evergreen Township, so we're going to talk with Blanche about her experiences growing up in Evergreen Township. Now, you said that you moved there, when was that?
1931. I was born in Sabika, as well as my two brothers, and then we moved there the fall of 31. My dad had been up there during the summer building a house and farming, and then they came and got us at Sabika and brought us up there.
Okay, now, Evergreen had a town, it's a town, there was a town there, and how far were you from the town?
3 miles.
3 miles to the north?
No, we were a mile east and 2 miles north.
Okay, very good. And you had two brothers?
Dale and Bert. And Dale died last November here in Detroit Lakes, and Bert was killed, drug on a horse the night before he was 11 years old.
Oh, tell us about that.
Well, the boys went to meet my dad on the farm and got on the horses and rode him to the watering trough, and the horse spooked and turned around and he fell off and his foot caught in the harness.
Oh, how sad.
Yeah, it was. We brought him into Dr. Otto and Frazee, but he was dead.
It's very sad. So what did you have on your farm? You had horses and cows
and pigs and sheep and chickens, and I think that was it. We had one separate barn for the sheep and another little hut for the pigs, and we had a hen house. And my dad raised corn. One year we had a field of flax, I remember that.
Really?
Yes, and we had a silo, so we had the corn, so that was made into silage each fall. And I imagine he had wheat and barley. He also had a lot of meadowland. They put up the hay that was fed to the animals during the winter months.
And then now this was in the 30s, and so they could cut the meadows.
Oh yes.
They were dry.
We had in fact, I've lived on 3 different farms in my lifetime, and all 3 of the farms had the Red Eye River running through it.
Is that right?
Yes. The Red Eye River ran through the center of the farm in Evergreen Township, and I lived in 2 different places at Sabika, and we had the Red Eye River through our farm there too.
And it ends up eventually, the water ends up in the Mississippi River. Right. Now, you went to school out there. Did the town have a school? Where was the school?
The school was about a half a mile south of our place, and I went there until the 7th grade, and then our teacher decided we could take the 7th and 8th grade together, and we did, and we completed the work, and then the state wouldn't send us the exam to take so we could go into high school. So there were 6 of us, and we all had to repeat the 8th grade over again.
But you knew all the answers then.
It was a very dull year because we had completed all the work before. But then Superintendent Wiley came out and talked to my folks, and they were going to start a bus system out that way the first year. And my folks decided I could go to school and take the 8th grade and 2 high school subjects at the same time, which I did. And then I completed the rest of high school in 3 years.
Okay. Tell us about that bus.
Well, they called it the Cracker Box.
Really?
And it was green and white, but for those of us on the farm, all we had was Model A's was the latest in car designs then, so it was a good form of transportation. It wasn't the warmest in the wintertime, but we survived.
You survived.
We dressed accordingly.
Okay. Now you mentioned that it wasn't a free ride.
No. My folks, the charge was $3 a year to start out with.
Oh, a year?
Oh, no, excuse me, a month.
A month?
A month, yeah. $3 a month to ride the bus, and I have no idea what it went up to in the other years. But my folks were very poor, but they decided that I needed the education, so they paid it, and I went on.
Okay. And it was a long ride.
Oh, yes.
It was a long ride, because did you go to Wolf Lake and then from Wolf Lake go in, or did they start at Wolf
The
Lake?
first year I started, I walked 2.5 miles to the bus, and then I got on down on the corner of 87, and then rode into town, which was 14 miles.
14, okay.
But then, by the time the last year came, we were picked up in the morning. He came out, the 16 miles, picked us up, and then we drove all the way around into Wolf Lake and some of the years.
You must have been cold in the dead of winter by the time you got to school.
Well, one morning I walked down there, it was 52 below. 2 mornings I walked down, and there was no school that day. And I was at the Herman Miller farm watching for the bus to come, and it finally didn't come. I think they had a telephone, and I called, and they said no, school had been canceled. So I had to walk back home, but I froze parts of my body on those 2 days.
Oh, I am
On
sure.
my cheeks and in my arms, and it was cold. But we dressed in, we didn't have nylon stockings in those days. You had cotton stockings, you had long underwear, you had snow pants. You couldn't wear them to school, you had to have a dress. But then we had heavy coats and mittens and that my mother had knit and crocheted and things for us. And so we kept warm.
Who was the teacher that had you do the 2 grades in 1 year?
Oh, she was a very tiny teacher. She probably maintained the best discipline, I think, in the country school. And her name was Alice Lundberg. She's an aunt, or she was an aunt of Mayor Voxland from Moorhead. And I think she was a sister of Carl Lundberg from Detroit Lakes here. And she still has a sister living in this area, too.
And you graduated valedictorian of your class.
Yes. And the girl from the next school district to ours in Spruce Grove Township was the salutatorian that year. So we felt the country schools were very well represented.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we've run out of time.
I talked too much.
No, you didn't talk too much. You've got many, many stories that are so interesting.
I'm sorry, Carol.
No, don't apologize. So thank you for listening to the story that Blanche has about growing up in Evergreen Township.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Museum Roadshow, brought to you by 125 Apparel.